Sweetheart, we're not going. Caps and gowns are a loser's parade. My mother said that the week before I walked the Stanford stage as computer science valedictorian. For 5 years, she had quietly drained my dead grandmother's college trust, over $180,000, to pay for my 17-year-old brother's AAU basketball trainers. Trainers no scout had come to see in 18 months. She didn't know I knew. Neither did my father. Neither did Jordan. But the man beside me at graduation knew. So did the trust lawyer, who'd walk into their kitchen the next morning carrying a Sacramento court order. I had been quiet for 9 years. By 11 that night, my speech was trending #1 on TikTok, and my father would whisper one sentence into a room that no longer belonged to him. That sentence cost him a lake house. If this is already hitting you in the chest, take a second to like and subscribe, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. I'm Wanda, 22, and this is the story of the week my mother called my graduation a loser's parade and woke up to find the trust she'd been rating had a clause she never read. Let's go back 2 months, to the morning my fiancé asked me to stay a secret. Owen proposed on a Saturday at the foot of the Point Pinos Lighthouse in Pebble Beach. The fog was so thick that we couldn't see the water, only hear it. He didn't kneel. He just stood there with his hands in his coat pockets and said, very quietly, "Will you let me make this official before the world finds out who you are?" I said yes before I understood what I was agreeing to. That was a problem, because I had been preparing for almost a decade to make sure the world found out who I was on my own terms, and on a very specific day. I needed the graduation to come first. I needed my mother's mouth to commit one more time, in front of witnesses, to the version of me she had built in her head. The quiet daughter who was useful for chores, predictable for guilt, invisible for inheritance. That version of me had to exist publicly until the moment it didn't. Owen understood. He always understood, even when I couldn't say it. He said, "We keep it quiet for 2 months. Then I sit in the front row at Stanford. Then we walk into their kitchen." I asked him if he was sure he wanted to walk into that kitchen. He said, "I have wanted to walk into that kitchen for 6 years." I should explain what I mean by their kitchen. I grew up in Folsom, California, the kind of suburb where every 4th Tuesday somebody puts out a sign for travel team tryouts and pretends the kid in question is the next LeBron. My father, Hayes Rivenberg, owned, I should say, a small insurance brokerage in a strip mall on Sunrise Boulevard. My mother, Eileen, used to be a cheerleader at Folsom High and never stopped behaving like the prettiest girl in the room. My brother Jordan is 5 years younger than me. From the day Jordan could grip a basketball, he was the family religion. I was the family pew, the place you sat to watch him. Nobody put it that way out loud, but I have the receipts. When I was 12, my mother forgot my birthday because Jordan had his first day of clinic training at the Roseville facility. I sat in the kitchen at 6 in the evening with a school-made paper crown on my head and a frozen ravioli on a plate, waiting. The garage door opened at 9. My mother came in flushed and smiling. She looked at the paper crown and said, "Oh, sweetheart, did you have fun with yourself today?" Then she set down a Roseville Rams jersey on the counter, still in the plastic sleeve, and said, "Look what they sized for him. I wanted to make sure they had enough left in his size before I came home." I took the paper crown off. I put it in the trash. She did not see me do it. She was at the sink rinsing the jersey tag. When I was 14, my father gave Jordan a pair of $500 Air Jordans and slid a $15 Starbucks gift card across the dinner table to me. He said, "Go get yourself something. You like that fancy coffee." I had never bought a coffee in my life. I drank tap water. I was the one who saved the household money. I had a small notebook in my room where I tracked our electricity bill against our thermostat setting, because I had figured out that if we set the air conditioning 2 degrees higher at night, we saved about $30 a month. I had presented this to my mother once. She had said, "That's a cute little hobby, sweetheart. You should learn to do nails instead. People pay you for nails." When I was 13, I started teaching myself Python on a donated laptop in the back room of the Folsom Public Library. I had to sign up for a 1-hour slot. If you used it for longer, the desk volunteer would tap your shoulder and you had to leave. I learned to write efficient code because inefficient code didn't fit in 60 minutes. The librarian who ran the back room was a man named Mr. Adelman. He had retired from teaching high school chemistry the year before. He noticed that I was the only kid who came in 5 days a week, that I never asked for help, and that I always returned the keyboard wipes to the correct drawer when I was done. Around the second month, Mr. Adelman started leaving a small spiral notebook for me, labeled with my first name on a piece of masking tape. The notebook lived in the third drawer down at the reference desk. He never told anyone else it existed. Inside the notebook he had written, in his thin pencil handwriting, things to read when the hour ends. He had hand-copied the names of papers and articles for me: Hopfield, Hinton, Tukey. I read them on the bus home. My grandmother, Adelaide Marston, was the only person in my family who noticed. Every time I came to her house, she would put a glass of cold milk in front of me and ask, "What did you build today?" Not, "How's school?" Not, "How's your mother?" "What did you build today?" She was 81 years old and she asked the right question. I would tell her what I had built. Sometimes it was a small thing, a function that took a list and returned only the prime numbers. Sometimes it was nothing. Just a loop I was proud of. She would nod and ask me to walk her through the logic. She had been a paralegal for 40 years and her brain was a clean grid. She would point at one step in my explanation and say, "There, that part. You hid the work in that part. Pull it out." She was always right. She did not flatter me. She also did not condescend. She treated me like a colleague, and I had never been treated like a colleague before in my life. In her kitchen, she had a small jade plant on the windowsill. Every Sunday, she would dust the leaves one by one with a soft brush. She said the plant had been her mother's. She said the plant was older than my mother. She said one day it would be mine. I asked her if I should water it for her sometimes. She said, "No, sweetheart. The day you water it is the day I'm gone." I watered it for the first time on November 9th, 2018. In November of 2018, my grandmother had a stroke. The hospital let me sit beside her for an hour before my mother arrived. Adelaide looked at me with one side of her mouth working and the other side asleep, and she said the last thing she would ever say to me. She said, "Your trust is yours. Don't let your mother touch it. If she touches it, call Esme." I was 15. I didn't know who Esme was. I didn't know what a trust was. I nodded because she needed me to nod. She died the next morning. At the funeral, my parents spent the entire reception looking for Jordan. He had wandered to the donut table and was sitting on the floor eating powdered sugar straight out of the box. My mother said, "Look at him. He's so devastated." He was 10. He was eating a donut. 2 months later, in January of 2019, my mother brought a small stack of papers to the kitchen counter while I was eating cereal. She said, "Sweetheart, sign right here. It's just so we can release some of Grammy's emergency money for Jordan's spring clinic." I signed where she pointed. I was 15. It was $20,000. I did not learn that for almost 6 more years. I was 15 years old. I only knew my grandmother had said one last sentence to me. I had not yet understood why she had to say it. In the months between my grandmother's funeral and the next summer, I changed. Not loudly. I just stopped expecting anything. I stopped asking my mother for school supplies. I bought my own composition notebooks at the dollar store using money I earned shoveling old neighbors' driveways. I stopped reading at the dining table because my father had told me reading made my face look mean. I read in the laundry room with the door closed. The dryer running gave me cover from anyone calling my name. The summer I turned 16, my parents flew Jordan to a national AAU showcase in Atlanta. The trip cost just under $30,000. My mother told the neighbors it was a Scout-attended event. It wasn't. It was a registration tournament. Anyone with a credit card and a son under 18 could enter. That summer, I stayed home alone for the first time in my life. I had the house, the kitchen, and the laptop my father had bought Jordan 2 years earlier and then forgotten. Jordan only used it for video games. The keyboard had Cheeto dust between every key. I cleaned it with a baby wipe and a bobby pin. That was the summer I entered the FinAI Open Hackathon. FinAI Open was a remote, anonymous coding competition for high school students sponsored by a tech company nobody at my high school had heard of, Carrington Labs. The prompt was a clean one. Build a model that can predict consumer credit default risk from publicly available signals. The submission window was 12 days. I spent 10 of them in the kitchen with iced tea and no air conditioning. I worked from 7 in the morning to 3 the next morning. I ate cold rice with soy sauce. I slept in 4-hour blocks on the couch in the den because the bedroom got too hot in the afternoon. I cleaned the Cheeto dust out of Jordan's old laptop with a baby wipe and a bobby pin and a single drop of dish soap on a microfiber cloth. The model I submitted was a small ensemble, 3 weak learners stacked on top of a gradient-boosted decision tree, with one custom feature I had figured out from reading a CFPB white paper my grandmother had mailed me the previous Christmas. Adelaide had clipped the abstract out of a print magazine and stapled it to the back of a holiday card. I do not know how she had known I would need it. I came in first. 3 days after the results, I got an email at 3 in the morning. The subject line was just my username. The body said, "Wanda, are you currently being supervised by anyone? Owen Carrington." I sat on my bedroom floor staring at the screen for 40 minutes. The house was dark. Jordan was in Atlanta. My parents were in Atlanta. There was no supervision in any meaningful sense at any point in my upbringing, but the question still felt loaded. I wrote back, "No, I'm alone in the library. I'm 16. He wrote back 12 minutes later, "I'd like to buy your model. Then I'd like to talk to you about what comes after that. Bring an adult you trust to the next call." There was no adult in my life I trusted. I wrote back, "I don't have one." He wrote, "I'll find you one." The next morning, a woman named Esme Lockridge walked into the coffee shop 2 blocks from the library where I had been told to wait. She was small, gray-haired, in a navy blazer. She set a manila folder on the table and said, "Your grandmother left a note for me." The note said that if a stranger ever offered you something larger than your understanding, you were to bring them to me first. "Hello, Wanda. I have been waiting 6 years to meet you." I almost cried. I didn't. Instead, I asked her how long she had known my grandmother. She said, "I was a junior at her firm in 1976. She trained me. She held the door open for me when no one else would. When she retired, I took 2 of her files with me, the trust documents she had built for herself, and the trust documents she said she would one day need for a granddaughter. She gave them to me 18 years before you were born." I asked her how she knew she would have a granddaughter at all. She said, "She didn't. She built them anyway. She said women had to plan for the people they hadn't met yet, because nobody else would." I wrote that down on a napkin and put it in my wallet. I still have the napkin. 3 Zoom calls later, I had signed a letter of intent. The terms were 18% equity in Carrington Labs at IPO in exchange for the underlying intellectual property of my model. Because I was a minor, the actual stock transfer was scheduled for my 18th birthday in May of 2021. Esme was my fiduciary advisor. Owen Carrington was my counterparty. The contract was 31 pages. My mother saw nothing. I told my parents I was working on an AP computer science independent project. My mother said, "That's nice, sweetheart. Don't stay up too late, you'll get acne." That was the last full sentence my mother said to me that summer. Pause for a second. If your parents ever told you your dreams mattered less than your siblings, if you were the quiet kid in the back of the family photo, type, "I see you," in the comments. I want to know how many of us were the ones who learned to disappear at our own dining tables. I was 18 the first morning I walked into the Stanford campus, and it was the first morning of my life I could breathe. I had won a competitive admit and a low-income grant my parents thought was paying my tuition. It wasn't. My tuition was being paid out of an early dividend distribution from Carrington Labs equity that my mother didn't know existed. Owen had set up the transfers through a clean LLC in Delaware so that nothing in my undergraduate financial aid file would raise an audit flag. My freshman year, I ate ramen in my dorm. I didn't tell anyone. The girls on my floor felt sorry for me and brought me bagels. I let them. I learned later that letting other people be kind to you is part of being okay. I had not been allowed to learn that at home. At home, kindness had been a transaction with a receipt, and the receipt always came due. My freshman roommate was a girl from Idaho named Greer. She wanted to be a doctor. She had never met anyone from California. She would put her hand on my forearm when she asked me a question, the way some people do, and I flinched the first 3 times she did it. By the end of the semester, I didn't flinch anymore. She did not know that was a milestone. I did not tell her. In June of 2022, the summer after my freshman year, I signed my full employment contract with Carrington Labs, Director of Algorithms, remote. $185,000 a year, plus performance equity. I was 19. I sublet a single bed in a graduate housing unit on Junipero Serra Boulevard because nobody on my floor would have understood why I wasn't worried about the rent. In August of 2024, Carrington Labs went public on the NASDAQ. The opening valuation was around $5 billion. My 18% equity, on paper, was worth just over $920 million. I sat in my dorm room and watched the opening bell on my phone with the sound off. I drank a cup of plain hot water with lemon. Owen texted me one word: done. I did not feel rich. I felt patient. That afternoon, I walked to a bench in the Cantor Arts Garden. I sat there for 2 hours. I watched a man with a leaf blower clear the path between the magnolia trees. I thought about my grandmother's jade plant. The plant was in a box in the back of my closet, wrapped in newspaper. I had been carrying it from dorm room to dorm room for 3 years. I had not put it on a windowsill yet, because I had not yet found a windowsill that felt like mine. That night, I unwrapped the plant and put it on the kitchen window of my graduate housing unit. The leaves were dusty. I cleaned each one with a soft brush. That night, I called Esme and asked her to begin the first scheduled audit of my grandmother's trust. The trust was a 6-year cycle instrument. Adelaide had set it up that way on purpose, because she knew my mother. She knew that my mother could hold a smile through any 6-month review, but she could not hold a story through 6 years. The audit was a slow trap, and it had been ticking since 2018. It went off in November of 2024. Esme called me on a Wednesday. She said, "Wanda, I have the bank statements. There have been 4 withdrawals from the trust account over the past 5.5 years. Total, $180,000. Each withdrawal carries your mother's signature. None of them carry yours." I was on a study lounge couch in Gates Hall. I did not move. I did not cry. I asked Esme to please send me the scans. I sat with my laptop open for 2 hours, reading the entries one at a time. 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 80,000. I had been quiet for almost a decade. I had decided long before this moment that I would not speak until my parents had walked themselves all the way into the trap they had set, and I knew exactly when that trap would close, because I was going to be the one to close it. On the day I crossed the Stanford stage, in January of 2025, Owen, Esme, and I met in Esme's office in Sacramento. The office is on the 11th floor of a brick building on J Street, with a single window overlooking the railroad tracks. Esme spread the statements across her conference table in chronological order. She said, January 2019, 20,000 for what your mother described to the bank as Jordan's Spring Clinic. August 2020, 30,000 for East Coast AAU travel. May 2022, 50,000 for what she called a European recovery program, which is a thing she invented. July 2023, 80,000 for private training packages in Roseville. She tapped each statement once. She used the same teller every time. He thought she was a real estate agent investing for her son. He thought he was being kind. She paused. She said, "I interviewed the teller yesterday. He cried in my office. He said she came in wearing a blazer and pearls every time. He said she always brought him a small box of See's candies. He said he had never thought to ask why a mother needed to withdraw cash from a trust account for a teenager. He said he was so sorry." I asked Esme if I wanted to press charges against my mother. Esme looked at me for a long moment. She said, "You can. The county will take a case like this. It would be embezzlement under a fiduciary capacity. The minimum is 1 year. The maximum is significant. But Wanda, a criminal case will eat you. It will eat your foundation. It will eat your fiancé's quiet." I said, "Then no, the civil clawback is enough." Esme said, "Good. That is what your grandmother would have said." Owen said, "I'd like to come forward now." I said, "No." I said, "Wait." I said, "Wait until I read the speech." Esme looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, the same nod my grandmother had given me from the hospital bed. She said, "Then let me explain the clawback." The clawback was the second half of my grandmother's design. The trust she had built for me was protected on the surface, but underneath, it was wired. Adelaide had also left a separate set of assets to my parents, but those assets were contingent. They depended on her trust to me remaining intact. The instrument was called an in terrorem clause, which under California probate code is enforceable when properly drafted, and Adelaide had drafted it like a woman who had been a paralegal in 1962 and had never forgotten what a paralegal could do. The clause read, in plain language, that if any party other than the named beneficiary, namely me, withdrew funds from the trust without my written consent, the contingent assets reverted. The contingent assets were the lake house in Tahoe, valued at approximately $1.4 million, and a managed securities portfolio worth $640,000, both currently held in the names of Hayes and Eileen Rivenberg. Esme said, "The moment you sign the petition, those two assets pass back to the Marston estate and then forward to you by direction. The order can be executed in California Superior Court inside 48 hours. I did not sign that day. I sat with it. I went home to Stanford and wrote my speech. I wrote the first draft on a Wednesday night. I wrote it on a yellow legal pad with a black pen because I wanted to feel the pressure of the pen on the page. I rewrote it on Sunday. I rewrote it again 2 weeks later after Owen read it on a flight. He wrote 3 sentences in the margin and said, "This one. Keep this one. Don't change it." I kept it. In the meantime, my mother began calling me. She had not called me in 11 months. "Sweetheart," she said, "tell me again, is Stanford strict about parental attendance? Because Jordan has this showcase and your father was thinking." I said, "Stanford is not strict. Do what you want." I said it with a small smile that she could not hear. I almost laughed. I held it back. There were still 6 weeks to go. In May of 2025, Owen and I drove to Pebble Beach. The lighthouse at Point Pinos has been working since 1855. It is the oldest continuously operating lighthouse on the West Coast. I learned that fact from Owen on the drive. He likes facts the way some men like silence. He had a ring with him. The ring was not new. It had belonged to his mother. His mother had raised him alone on a teacher's salary in eastern Pennsylvania, and she had died of pancreatic cancer when Owen was 24. He had taken her ring from her finger himself in the hospice. He had kept it in a small velvet pouch in his desk drawer for 14 years. He said his mother's name was June. He said she had taught 4th grade in a town called Lewisburg for 32 years, and she had kept a list of every student she had ever taught in a yellow legal pad in the bottom drawer of her desk, and the list was 912 names long. He said she had never asked him for anything except that he be kind to the people who could not pay him back. He said the only time she had ever been angry with him in his entire life was when he was 16, and he had told a classmate that the classmate's clothes smelled funny. She had grounded him for 2 weeks. She had said, You will never be the reason another child cries about something they can't fix. Do you understand me? Owen Carrington. He said he had understood her. He said he had spent every day of his adult life trying to be a man she could have introduced to her classroom without apology. He said, "She would have liked you. She would have liked that you eat ramen in a $900 million dorm room." I cried for the first time in this story. One tear. Then I stopped. I said, "I want to keep a secret for 2 more months." He said, "I know. I've been waiting for you since you were 16. 2 months is nothing." We sat on a bench above the water and made the plan. 3 steps. The valedictorian speech with the foundation announcement. Owen visible in the VIP row, where the family of any new philanthropic chair would naturally sit. Then, the next morning, the 3 of us, me, Owen, and Esme, at the door of the Folsom house. I asked Owen one more time, "Are you sure you want to walk into that kitchen?" He said, "I have wanted to walk into that kitchen for 6 years. For the first time in my life, I had a family. And that family had not needed a single piece of paper to prove it." A week before graduation, I called my mother to confirm the seating logistics. The call lasted 23 seconds. I said, "Mom, the family section opens at 9. Reception is in the Cantor Arts Garden at 3. She said, "Sweetheart, we're not going. Caps and gowns are a loser's parade. Jordan has scouts at his showcase that matter." I said, "Which scouts?" She said, "Honey, does it matter? They'll be there." I said, "Okay, Mom." I hung up. I texted Owen, "We're on." He wrote back, "Confirmed. Esme is filing the draft petition Friday." That was a Tuesday. We had 3 days. I spent that night packing 2 suitcases, one for graduation week, one for Palo Alto, my permanent move-out. I did not announce the move-out to my parents. They had not asked where I would live after graduation. They had assumed, I think, that I would come home, get a low-paying coding job in Sacramento, and start helping with Jordan's expenses. That was the version of me they had built. It was the version I needed them to keep believing in for 3 more days. On Thursday afternoon, Esme sent Owen the petition draft. On Friday morning, she filed it under seal with a Sacramento Superior Court judge who had clerked for my grandmother's first attorney, a man named Charles Marston, no relation. The judge had known Adelaide. He read the clause. He signed the order. The order was scheduled to publish at 8 in the morning the day after graduation. The night before graduation, I stood in front of the mirror in my Palo Alto hotel room at 2 in the morning. Owen was asleep on the couch in the suite because I had asked him to. I had wanted one last night alone with my reflection. I read the speech to the mirror. I read it twice. The second time I read it, I saw my grandmother standing behind me in the mirror. She wasn't smiling. She nodded once. I want to tell you the truth about that moment. I was not hallucinating. I knew she wasn't really there. I knew my brain had built her out of 9 years of practiced absence, the way the brain builds rooms in dreams that you have never visited, but somehow always know the floor plan of. She was not a ghost. She was a memory I had folded and refolded until it had become muscle. I said to the mirror, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Grandma, I'm going to read it tomorrow. They aren't coming. Are you proud?" The mirror, of course, said nothing back. The plant on the desk did not move. The traffic outside the hotel kept going. A car horn sounded from the El Camino Real. Someone laughed in the hallway. A door closed. I sat down on the carpet at the foot of the bed and folded the speech once down the middle. I went to bed at 3. I crossed the stage at noon the next day in front of 8,000 people in Frost Amphitheater. The Stanford Computer Science Department had voted me valedictorian of the class of 2025. There were 190 undergraduate computer science majors that year. I had the highest GPA of all of them, a 3.99. The single A- was an introductory writing course in my freshman fall semester, where the professor had said in office hours that my essays were too clean, like a robot wrote them. I had thanked him for the feedback and never asked him to revise. The speech was 8 minutes long. I had memorized it. I did not look at the lectern paper. I looked at the 8,000 faces. The first minute I addressed the class, I thanked them. I said good luck. Standard. The second minute, I told them about a girl who learned to code in the back room of the Folsom Public Library on a 1-hour timer. The third minute, I told them about my grandmother. I said her name. Adelaide Marston. I said that she had been the only person in my childhood who asked me what I had built that day. I said that she had been a paralegal in 1962, when women were not supposed to read contracts, and she had read them anyway. I said that she had died on a Wednesday in November of 2018, and she had said one last sentence to me, and that sentence had been about a trust. The fourth minute, I announced the Adelaide Marston Foundation. I told the audience that as of that morning, a $25 million endowment had been established to provide full Stanford tuition for 500 first-generation undergraduates over the next decade. I said that the first cohort would be selected from students who had used a public library as their primary computer access point. I said that we were also funding 3,000 laptops to be distributed to public libraries in rural California, starting in Sacramento County and moving outward. I said that every laptop would have a small plaque on the underside that read, simply, "From a girl who needed one." I said that the plaque had been Mr. Adelman's idea. He had retired from the Folsom Public Library 2 years earlier. He was in the audience that day. I asked him to stand up. He stood up. The audience clapped for him for 38 seconds. I told them that the foundation would not accept any board member who had not used a public resource at some point in their education. I said that the foundation would publish its grant decisions transparently every quarter. I said that the foundation would never have a gala. The audience laughed. The audience stood up. They didn't sit back down for a minute and a half. The fifth minute, I said the line Owen had circled. I said, "To the parents in this country who told their daughters they didn't matter enough to attend, thank you. Your absence taught me everything you never meant to teach me." I let it sit. I said, "And, to the grandmothers who watched anyway, we built this for you." I stepped back. I walked off the stage to a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. I have the timestamp. The Stanford broadcast team logged it. Owen was in the front row of the VIP section in a plain charcoal suit. He did not stand up and clap loudly. He stood up and clapped exactly the way the other industry sponsors clapped. He nodded once when I looked at him. Just once. That was our promise. The Stanford CS Department's social media team posted a 90-second clip at 4 in the afternoon, captioned only with my name and the foundation announcement. By 6 in the evening, it was at 500,000 views. By 8, it had crossed 14 million. By 11, it was the #1 trending video on TikTok in the United States, and Fox News had picked it up for their late primetime block. At 11 o'clock that night, my parents pulled into the driveway of our Folsom house. Jordan had lost his AAU showcase game 18 points to 2. There had been no scouts. There had been 35 parents and a tournament photographer who kept pointing his camera at the other team. My father had walked out of the gym before the final buzzer. My mother had stayed long enough to tell the coach that the referee had been ridiculous. Jordan had ridden home in the back seat with his hood up and his face against the window, watching the strip malls slide by. He did not look at his phone the entire drive. He had 32 text messages on it. He had not opened any of them. My father was furious. My mother was tired. Jordan went straight upstairs without saying goodnight. My mother walked into the living room and turned on the TV. The Fox News chyron read, "Stanford valedictorian announces $25 million foundation for first-gen students." The screen showed me. My mother dropped her purse. She said very softly, "Is that her?" My father walked in from the kitchen with a glass of water. He looked up. He stopped walking. He said, "Quiet, let me hear." The clip cut to me at the lectern. Then it cut to a wide shot of the VIP row. Then it cut to a tighter shot. Owen, applauding once, professionally, like an industry sponsor. My father set the glass of water down on the side table without looking at the table. He missed. The glass fell to the carpet. He didn't pick it up. He whispered, "Wait, Is that, is that Carrington? Owen Carrington? My mother said, it can't be. Lots of men look like that. My father said, no, it's Carrington. I would know that face anywhere. I just submitted a job application to his fund 8 weeks ago. My mother said, what? My father said, Forbes did a cover on him in March. I taped it up in the brokerage break room. Every agent in our office has stared at that face for 2 months. It's Carrington. My mother sat down on the arm of the couch. She did not let her body land. She just lowered until she felt the wood. My father went on, more to himself than to her. I cold applied. I thought maybe with my insurance background I could help his foundation arm structure something. The rejection letter came back in 9 days. I assumed they got hundreds of those a week. My mother said, Hayes. My father did not answer. My mother said, Hayes. Why would she be next to him? There was a silence. My mother looked at the screen, then at my father, then at the screen. She said, Hayes, why would Wanda be sitting next to him? My father did not answer. He sat down on the couch. My mother reached for the remote. She turned off the television. It was too late. Their phones had begun lighting up at 8 in the evening, but they had been at Jordan's game and had ignored every buzz. Now, on the silent couch, both phones lit up at once. 53 text messages from neighbors and church members. The first one, from a woman named Marlene Halpern who lived 3 doors down, just said, When's the future Mrs. Carrington coming home to see us? My mother read it twice. Then she put the phone face down on the coffee table. She said, I don't understand. My father said, I do. I want you to pause for a second because what comes next is the part that will sit with you. Sometimes the loudest thing you'll ever say to your parents is the word no, spoken quietly while the room watches. If you've ever had to say that no, you know it's not about revenge. It's about no longer pretending you can save them from themselves. The next morning, my mother woke up at 6 and started calling neighbors. She told them there was a celebration brunch at the house at 11. She said she was so proud of her Stanford daughter, who had been such a quiet little overachiever. You know how it is. She said she had been planning the brunch for weeks. She said Whole Foods Catering had been on her calendar since April. She had called Whole Foods Catering at 6:15 that morning. By 10 in the morning, the dining room of our Folsom house was set for 30 people. There was a fruit platter, 2 trays of mini quiches, a coffee carafe, a sparkling water carafe, and a small cardboard sign that said, Welcome Home Wanda in my mother's handwriting. The marker was still uncapped on the kitchen counter when I arrived. The cap had rolled into the sink. She had also dug out, from the back of a hall closet, a photograph of me from 2nd grade in a small wood frame. I had never seen the frame before. The photograph itself I had not seen in 15 years. It showed me in a yellow corduroy jumper, holding a paper bag puppet shaped like a bear. The puppet's eyes were lopsided because I had glued them on myself. I was smiling. I had no front teeth. My mother had set the photograph on the sideboard, propped against a vase of grocery store sunflowers, with a small placard taped beneath it that read, in her handwriting, Our proud Stanford girl. She had bought the placard at the dollar store that morning. The price sticker was still on the back. My father was wearing a brand new Stanford polo. The tag was still on the underside of the collar. I could see it from across the room when I walked in. The guests were a mix. There were 6 neighbors. There were 2 aunts and a cousin. There were 3 of my father's co-workers from the brokerage. There was a couple my mother had met at one of Jordan's AAU tournaments. There was the Halpern family. Marlene Halpern was the woman who had texted my mother the night before. Owen and I and Esme walked in at 10:36 in the morning. My mother saw Owen first. She said, very brightly, Sweetheart, you didn't tell me you were bringing a friend. I said, He isn't a friend. This is Owen, my fiancé, and this is Esme Lockridge, my grandmother's trust attorney. The room went silent. The fruit platter sat in the middle of the dining table like a misunderstanding. My mother's hand was still on the orange juice pitcher. She let go of it. The pitcher slid an inch and hit the edge of the trivet. Pulp foamed up at the rim. My father stood up from the couch in the next room. He said, Wanda, We were just going to make breakfast. I said, Esme has something to show you first. Esme set a black leather case on the dining table, gently, between the quiches. She opened it. The case contained 4 bank statements, a small portable speaker, the trust document with the clawback clause highlighted in red, and a stamped court order from Sacramento Superior Court issued at 8 that morning. Esme said, Mr. and Mrs. Rivenberg, I am the trustee successor of the Adelaide Marston Trust. I am here this morning to inform you formally that the trust has been audited and that 4 unauthorized withdrawals totaling $180,000 have been identified. Each withdrawal carries Mrs. Rivenberg's signature. Each was made without the written consent of the beneficiary, my client, Wanda Rivenberg. Per the terms of the in terrorem clause executed by Adelaide Marston in October of 2018, the contingent assets passing to Mr. and Mrs. Rivenberg, namely the lake property in El Dorado County and the managed securities portfolio held at Wells Fargo, are forfeited and revert to the Marston estate as of 8 a.m. Pacific Time today. Here is the court order. She slid the court order across the table. It came to rest beside the fruit platter. My mother stared at it. My mother said, Wanda, this is family business. I said, Mom, this is banking business. She said, That's not fair. That's not fair, Wanda. She turned to the room. Her voice climbed. She said, I want everyone to leave, now. Marlene Halpern picked up her catering plate and turned the plate over so the muffin slid back into the basket. She walked across the room and put a hand on my arm. She said, Wanda, honey, I have been waiting for this morning since you were 9 years old, the summer your mother sent you to my house in flip-flops in a heat wave because she had forgotten to wash any of your real shoes. I bought you a pair of canvas sneakers at Payless on my own credit card and told her I'd found them in a donation bin. She never thanked me. I never told you. I should have. She squeezed my forearm once very gently. She said, I'm sorry I didn't tell anyone. I should have called somebody. I was a coward then. I won't be a coward this morning. Then she walked over to my mother. She set the catering plate down on the dining table. She looked down at my mother sitting on the floor and she said quietly, Eileen, you are not welcome at my house anymore. Then she left. My father pressed his palm against his Stanford polo, low against his stomach, like he was hurt. He sat down on a dining chair. He said very softly, 8 weeks ago, I sent a cover letter to Carrington Labs, to Owen Carrington's foundation arm. I didn't get an interview. They sent me a polite no. I thought it was just a normal no. Owen said, It was a normal no, sir. We did not connect the surname for 2 days. By the time we did, the decision had already been signed by our HR director. Your application was reviewed on merit. The merit was insufficient. My father did not look up. Esme pressed play on the small portable speaker. My mother's voice came out of it, tinny but unmistakable, recorded 18 months earlier through the bank's standard customer call line. My mother's voice said, This is for my son. He needs the funds. I'm investing in my son. Esme pressed stop. My mother sat down on the floor. Esme said gently, There is a second recording, Mrs. Rivenberg, from October of last year. It is shorter. In it, you tell the teller that my daughter doesn't need this money. She has a scholarship. She lives in a dorm. I will not play it now. I will not play it ever. It is in the case file. You may read the transcript at your leisure. My mother put her hand over her mouth. My father said very quietly, Why didn't you ask me, Eileen? My mother said, Hayes, we talked about it. We agreed. My father said, We talked about the first one, the 20,000. You told me you would put it back in 6 months. That was the only one. I didn't know. I didn't know about the other 3. The room was quiet. My father looked at me. He said, Wanda, I did not know about the other 3. I want you to know that. It does not change what I owe you. But I want you to know. I said, I know, Dad. I did know. I had known for months. The signatures on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th withdrawals were only my mother's. The first withdrawal had both their signatures, including mine, faked. The forensic handwriting analyst Esme had hired had been very clear. My father had been guilty of the first sin. My mother had been guilty of all four. Jordan walked in from the hallway. He had heard his name. He was barefoot, in basketball shorts, and his hair was still flat from the pillow. He said, "What's going on?" I said, "Jordan, Mom and Dad have been taking money from Grammy's trust for 5 years to pay for your basketball trainers. They are losing the lake house this morning because of it." Jordan looked at our mother on the floor. He said very softly, "Did she? Did she really?" My mother started to say something. She couldn't finish a sentence. Jordan looked at me. For the first time in maybe 7 years, my brother looked at me as if I were a person. He said, Did you get anything from it?" I said, "I got an education, and a foundation, and a lawyer who loved my grandmother. I got those without your trust money. The trust money was never about me." I let that sit. I said, "But you got 5 years of trainers no scout was actually watching. So you got something too. Just not what you thought you were getting." Jordan looked at the floor. The room was quiet. The Halperns had already left. The 3 brokerage coworkers stood up and quietly walked out of the dining room and out the front door. The 2 aunts and the cousin started to follow. The cousin paused at the door and said, "Wanda, honey, I am so sorry I never asked. I am so sorry." My Aunt Patricia stood up from the love seat in the corner. She was my father's older sister. She had not visited our house since 2017. She had stopped coming after she'd had an argument with my mother about, of all things, a recipe. She walked over to me. She did not touch me. She just stood there. She said, "Wanda, the recipe argument in 2017 was about a cake your grandmother used to make. Your mother said the recipe was hers now. I said it was Adelaide's. I said your grandmother had wanted you to have it. Your mother told me to get out of her house and not come back. I should have called you. I should have driven to Folsom and put the recipe in your mailbox. I am so sorry." She handed me a folded piece of paper. Yellow legal pad. Her handwriting. It was the cake recipe. I put it in my pocket. I said, "Thank you, Aunt Patricia." She left. My father said finally, "Wanda, give us a chance to make this right, please." I looked at Owen. Owen did not nod or shake his head. He simply held my gaze. He was telling me, with his face, that the answer was mine and only mine, and that he would hold whichever answer I chose without question. I looked at my mother on the carpet. I looked at my father on the dining chair. I looked at the orange juice still pooling around the trivet. I said no. I said it once. I said it quietly. I said it without raising my voice. My mother began to weep. My father did not say another word. I said, "I'm going to leave the house now. I'm going to take Owen and Esme with me. The court order is on the dining table. The bank will call you on Monday morning. I have asked Esme to give you 90 days to vacate the lake house. That is more time than you gave me." I walked to the door. I turned around. There was one more thing I wanted to say. Not for them. For Jordan. I said, "Jordan, if you want to come live with me and Owen in Palo Alto for the summer, you can. I will pay for community college tuition starting in the fall. I will not pay for a private trainer. If you accept those terms, the offer stands until August. If you don't, the offer expires." Jordan said very quickly, "I accept." I said, "Pack a bag." He went upstairs. I walked outside with Owen and Esme. I did not look back at the dining table or the orange juice or the Welcome Home Wanda sign. The marker cap was still in the sink. Esme drove. Owen sat in the back with me. He held my hand the whole way from Folsom to Sacramento, where Esme dropped us at the small hotel where we had stayed the night before. Neither of us said anything until we were in the room. Then I lay down on the bed, and I did not cry. I just lay there. Owen sat on the edge of the bed. He said, "Was that the way you wanted it to feel?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Good, then it was right." A month later, in July of 2025, the Adelaide Marston Foundation opened its first office in Palo Alto. 14 full-time staff. 500 scholarship awards in process. 3,000 laptops shipped to 41 rural California libraries by Labor Day. The first cohort would begin Stanford in the fall of 2026. My father lost the brokerage in late August. Not because of the court order, because his clients quietly canceled their policies. Nobody confronts a man in Folsom. They just stop returning his calls. He took a junior agent role at a larger firm in Roseville. He drives a Honda now. My mother was uninvited from 2 community boards. She stopped going to church. She and my father continued to live in the Folsom house, which they still own, but they don't speak to each other much. Eileen joined a yoga studio across town and spends most of her days there. I am told. I am told because Jordan tells me. Jordan lived with Owen and me in Palo Alto for the summer. He went to therapy 3 times a week with a woman named Dr. Iris Voss, who specialized in adolescents who had been carrying adult-sized expectations. He apologized to me in week 6 in a way that was real, with shaking hands and his eyes on the floor. He said, "I knew, Wanda. I knew about the money. Mom told me when I was 15. She said it was a gift from Grandma. She said you had agreed. I didn't ask. I knew you would never have agreed. I knew. I let him cry. I did not interrupt him. I let him take 3 full minutes to say what he needed to say. Then I said, 'Thank you for telling me. We are going to work from here, not from before here.' He nodded. He enrolled at Sierra College in Rocklin in September. He plays intramural basketball there. He is, by all accounts, the happiest he has been since he was 11. He calls me every Sunday at 6 in the evening. We have a standing order, 10 minutes minimum, 20 maximum. He always uses every minute. I imposed a 12-month no-contact period with my parents. Esme handles all correspondence with them. They wrote 1 letter in October asking for a sit-down to clear the air. I asked Esme to send a polite acknowledgement and to remind them that the no-contact period would end in June of 2026 and that any future relationship would be slow, conditional, and on my terms. Owen and I were married in December of 2025 in a small ceremony at the Carmel Mission, with Esme as my witness. Jordan walked me down the aisle. Owen and I were married in December of 2025 in a small ceremony at the Carmel Mission, with Esme as my witness. Jordan walked me down the aisle. Greer, my freshman roommate, flew in from her medical residency in Boise to be my maid of honor. Mr. Adelman came too. He sat in the second pew on the bride's side. He was the closest thing to a grandparent figure in the room. There were 19 guests. The reception was held at a small restaurant in Carmel by the Sea, where Owen had eaten dinner the night his mother passed away. He had wanted to mark the place. We ate halibut. We danced to one song. The song was Moon River. Mr. Adelman cried. 8 months later, in August of 2026, the first cohort of Adelaide Marston scholars enrolled at Stanford. There were 83 of them in the first class. 12 had used the Folsom Public Library at some point in their high school years. One of them was a girl from a town called Olivehurst. She wrote me a handwritten letter on yellow legal pad paper. I read it twice. Last night, Owen and I were on the back balcony of our Palo Alto house. The hills above Stanford were dark and the air smelled like eucalyptus. He asked me if I had any regrets. I said, "Only one. I wish Grandma had lived to see it. I made the cake last week." The one Aunt Patricia had written down on the yellow legal pad paper at the brunch and pressed into my pocket like a gift she had been carrying for 8 years. It was a simple sour cream coffee cake with brown sugar and walnuts and just enough cardamom to make you think your mouth was wrong. I baked it on a Sunday afternoon and brought it warm to the foundation office. The staff ate it standing up at the kitchenette counter. One of the new hires, a young woman from Bakersfield who had been a Marston scholar in the inaugural cohort, asked me where the recipe came from. I told her. She wrote it down on a napkin. She said she would teach it to her own children one day. I told her she should. I told her the recipe belonged to anyone who needed it now. That, I think, is what Adelaide would have wanted. She had not built a trust to make me rich. She had built a trust to make me free. The freedom was the point. The lake house, the portfolio, the foundation, the laptops in 41 rural libraries. All of it was downstream of the simple fact that she had made sure no one could decide for me what my voice was worth. Adelaide had lived long enough to teach me that silence isn't forgiveness. Silence is preparation. I had prepared for 9 years. When I finally said no to my mother, quietly, standing in the dining